Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with the preview for tonight's Lions versus Cowboys game. Gonna take a look at the DFS side of things. Make sure you guys are ready to go out there, build a few GPP lineups, and then on the prop side of things, gonna go over a few props, a little bit of exposure on Underdog and PrizePicks that you can keep an eye on for your own portfolio. A lot to get into. Should be a high-scoring, exciting affair tonight. Let's go ahead and get it started with the DFS side of things. DFS is going to be an interesting slate because depending on the contest you're entering, my strategy is going to vary quite wildly. I mentioned off the bat that this is a high total, relatively competitive game, and a lot of people on Twitter, just in general, right, talking about this game, are real excited about it. And unfortunately, that can lead to a lot of mistakes when you're building GPP lineups. When people get excited about a game, it's that high scoring, competitive game total that everyone is just itching for out there as a fan. They'll build lineups to cater towards that, right? And a lot of times when you get these close, high-scoring games, you'll see 3-3s, by far the most chalky build out there, taking 3 players from each team. You're going to see a lot of 2 quarterback sets. You're not going to see just a lack of creativity, I would say. And probably the best way to put it is a lot of people out there aren't willing to go with those 4-2s, those 5-1s in either direction. And in large field contests, like large field GPPs, 200K, 300K to first, a milli maker if they have it out there in Draftkings. Not sure as of right now. Either way, in those kind of builds, right, those 30,000, 50,000 entry type of contests, the way to get different, the way to go out there and build plus EV lineups is to build 5-1s in either direction. If you're going to go with a 4-2, make it a little bit more creative and build based on correlation. While there's certainly a chance tonight, right, that this is a high total game, that this is relatively competitive, in those large field contests, it's going to be way overutilized. I mean, the 3-3 rate's probably going to be at least like 30, maybe even 35%. And then if you're just looking at 4-2s in either direction, I would imagine that 90, maybe even 95% of lineups are going to be built within those constraints, right? A 4-2 either way, a 3-3 split down the middle. Those 5-1s, right, stacking either squad, I mean, you're looking at sub 5% ownership on each build. So if you're in the large field contest, I would say try and take that fandom aside, right? We all want to see that high total shootout, right? I mean, let's be real about it, right? Everyone wants to see that kind of game. If you're in the large field contest, you shouldn't be building that way though, right? Don't let your emotions, don't let your personal goals out there, right, try and hold you back from building lineups. Now, if you're in a single entry, 2 to 3 max, right, smaller field kind of tournament, you probably don't have to worry about it nearly as much. So that's why I was saying, like, depending on what I'm entering, it's going to change my strategy quite a bit. But I'm a large field GPP player. I won 50 max on almost all these showdown slates. At the very least, I'll be entering 20 lineups on any of these slates. When I'm building a whole portfolio of lineups, I want them to be plus EV, right? And even in a script like this, that's pretty obvious. A lot of times that contrarian mindset is the way to go. So that's how I'll be building tonight. I'll be trying to build a lot of 4-2s and 5-1s, and I won't have a single 3-3 lineup in my portfolio. It's risky, sure, but I'm building for the kind of contest that I'm entering. So with that being said, let's talk through some of the different game scripts that you could consider. And we'll start off with the Lions side of things, right? Let's go with the Lions onslaught. If you're going with a 5-1 Lions onslaught, you probably want to make it a little bit more rushing based. I think that both running backs are among the best plays on the slate, right? Gibbs and Montgomery. If you're going with the Detroit heavy lineup, you can consider their defense out there. And in general, it makes guys like Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown a little bit less productive, right? This is a team that likes to rush the ball. They're maybe the most rushing heavy team in all of the NFL. It's not like they aren't capable with the passing attack, but their identity is to go down there in the trenches and win. And a few weeks ago, the Bills gave them that blueprint, right? They went out there, had like 240 rushing yards against the Cowboys, and the Detroit Lions are a much better rushing team than the Buffalo Bills. So if they saw that blueprint, it's possible for them to go out there and run all over them. And if that were to happen on the road, you're talking about an extremely underutilized stack. In that game with the Cowboys, there was hardly even anyone on the Cowboys that got there, right? A 5-1 stack would have been the optimal for that kind of build. And don't think that that's an impossible scenario tonight. So Amon-Ra, PPR heavy receiver, you could still probably take him in some of those onslaughts because of the PPR upside on a site like Draftkings. Maybe not the biggest Jared Goff fan, but if you want to play one or even both of these running backs, that's probably where a bulk of my exposure would be. Down low, a lot of things that are going to go wrong for the guys building 3-3s is they're all going to end up on the same value plays too. So it's worth noting that Rico Dowdle will not be suiting up tonight, so Deuce Vaughn is getting some attention there. But up here in this like 2-3K range is where everyone's going to build, right? I mean, you're going to throw in Khalif Raymond, right, is a high upside GPP type of wide receiver. Jalen Tolbert has seen some usage out there for Dallas. Michael Gallup, Josh Reynolds, right, technically like your wide receiver 3 for each team are all going to get some looks out there. And if you're building 3-3s, using one of these guys as your value play, I mean, you're just not going to be different enough to the field. Whereas if maybe one of these Dallas wide receivers is one of the, 1 or 2 buybacks that you're taking in an onslaught, I feel a lot more comfortable about that lineup. So it's not always who you're playing, but it's also a lot about how you're playing certain combinations of players. And if you're going to take some of these chalky value plays, like I was just mentioning, they're best taken in onslaught type of scripts, right? 4-2s, 5-1s, because if you're building that 3-3 kind of script and you're taking one of these guys as your last man in, I mean, you're duplicating yourself with like 1,000 other entries. Like no joke, if you're spending upwards of $49,000 and taking one of these players as your last man in for a 3-3, good luck trying to not chop this with like 1,500 other people. It can still get there. It can still take down a GBP, right? But you don't want to be winning the GBP with 1,500 other people. It's just massively negative EV. It'll tank your results long term. And rather, right, if you want to get a little bit more different about it, maybe you throw in a Shoemaker, right? He's like, what, the 3rd string tight end out there for Dallas. Gets some snaps, right? He's more of a blocking tight end than anything. He could be a piece of leverage. Go down to Deuce Vaughn, right? He's a little bit chalky too, so you could probably lump him in with some of the other players up there. But Payne Hendershot, right? So he's technically the tight end 3 for Dallas. Shoemaker's technically number 2. They both sparingly play, right? Aren't out there all that often, but they at least play snaps, right? And if you're taking that chalky build, you've got to get different at some point, and it's probably one of these backup tight ends that gets the job done for me. Up top, if we're going with more of a Dallas-heavy build, I think a lot of people are discounting a Tony Pollard. I mean, he's had an extremely disappointing year, has not nearly lived up to the hype that he had going in. I mean, in the past, right, had Ezekiel Elliott just vulturing away usage, and without Elliott, people expected the world from him, right? I mean, he was a top 5 drafted running back when it came to best ball, season-long stuff, right? Was up there in the top 10 draft picks. $7,800 is more than reasonable, right? I'd actually say that Pollard is cheap on this kind of slate. And if Dallas is going to be playing from ahead, without Rico Dowdle, they're still going to give some usage to Deuce Vaughn, but Pollard probably sees an uptick, right? I mean, they're not going to completely trust the young Deuce Vaughn with all that usage. It wouldn't surprise me to see Tony Pollard maybe getting closer to like 70-75% of the work tonight, as opposed to the 60-65% that he's seen in the past. So the points per dollar values there, the script would heavily favor Pollard if we're taking him in an onslaught script for the Cowboys. And I think a lot of people are going to play Dak. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, right? These are your 2 highest owned players on the slate. You can still take them in an onslaught type of lineup, but maybe it's Tony Pollard at captain, right? Assuming that he scores a touchdown or 2. He does have huge play upside. Maybe you've seen him take 60, 80-yard touchdowns before off screen passes. He has an avenue to the optimal lineup, and I think at captain is particularly interesting for any of those Dallas heavy builds. Outside of that, up top, right, you fit in as many of the studs as possible. The important part is you want to be correlating them, right? Everyone else out there is just going to mix and match these players up top, not really think about correlation, and end up duplicating themselves 1,500 to 2,000 times out there. This mid-tier range is underutilized, especially because of how much chalk there is up top. So if you're looking for like Brandon Cooks, the kickers, the defenses, all of them are going to be much lower owned than they otherwise would be. And Brandon Cooks is your number 2 wide receiver, right? Pollard, Sam Laporta, Ferguson are getting some ownership, but if you mix in one of these mid-tier options, right, one of the defenses in an onslaught type of build, you're going to be different to the field right there. It's already going to kind of differentiate your build to begin with, right? Rather than taking like 4 spend ups and then 2 punts down low. adding in that mid-tier player, it gives you some extra salary for your value options, but also just changes up your lineup construction. So this mid-tier, especially like, the special teams kind of stuff, intrigues me for those large field contests. And in terms of value plays, I know we mentioned some of the backup tight ends, but Jalen Tolbert does get my attention out there. He's been playing a lot more snaps for the Cowboys. Gallup still sees slightly more usage than what you have with Jalen Tolbert, but Tolbert has started to catch up, and they have, almost identical downfield upside. So if you want to take one of these two for some differentiation, Tolbert's probably a little bit lower owned. And then outside of that, it's all about correlation, right? Just building lineups for the contest that you're entering. If you're in one of the smaller field stuff, go ahead, take your 3-3, right? Probably make sure you're leaving some salary on the table so you're not going to duplicate yourself 1,000 times, right? Even in a single entry, let's say like 1,000, 2,000 entry type of build, you might end up duplicating yourself like 20, 30 times if you go just full chalk, right? So either take one pivot, right? Give yourself some leverage at one of your 6 spots, or leave some salary on the table. You do one of those 2 things in a smaller field contest, you could probably get away with the more chalky mindset. On the prop side of things, I have to say, maybe my least favorite slate we've had for quite some time. It's definitely not my favorite when it comes to PrizePicks or here in Underdog. A couple reasons for that, and honestly, on PrizePicks, there's not going to be much to go over. We'll look at the board a little bit. I'll give you my thoughts over there, but in this game, all of the lines are extremely inflated. I mean, it's a high total game, close competitive game, and you see that reflected with a lot of the props. I would just warn against everyone out there from going crazy on this game, as it could easily go under that total, and kind of like we had with Ohio State versus Missouri last night. I'm not sure if anyone watched that college football game out there. The total was off by like 40 points. I mean, I'm not expecting that to happen in this game, but just know that when you get a game with these inflated totals, it's hard to go over. I mean, both of the short running backs are at like 50 yards. You have CeeDee Lamb at like 100 yards receiving. Amon-Ra St. Brown at over an 80-yard projection. It's not like it's impossible for these guys to hit. It's just tough. It's a tough scene, right? You only have those 4 quarters to work with. Both defenses are actually pretty capable this year, especially the Cowboys side. I have a hard time believing in a lot of these props. So I've actually gone pretty light on tonight. Like I said, there's not much over on PrizePicks that I've even entered at this point. But as of right now, these are the top 2 props I'd take. So first off, it's this over on Jahmyr Gibbs at 48.5. This is actually just bumped down from 50.5 down to 48.5. So you have that kind of working for you, right? A little bit of line adjustment that you can take advantage of. And on top of that, Dallas hasn't been amazing against the run. Now, they haven't been disappointing. They're still, I think, a top 15 squad against the run this year, but they have allowed over 80 yards per game. And compared to the passing defense, right, their rushing defense is far inferior. So if you're going to take any props against this Cowboys defense, you probably want to attack some of the rushing stuff. Now, if the Cowboys end up getting out to a huge lead, you have somebody like Detroit playing from behind, that would tank this prop here a little bit, which is just another reason that I don't love this slate, right? I mean, it's an ugly one, to say the very least. So out there, unit-wise, I would probably stay pretty light out here too, and that's what I've done for tonight. But I do like this over in Jahmyr Gibbs, a little bit of that line value. He was minus 130 on Pinnacle, over 50.5. So now that he's moved down to 48.5, you actually got to like it a little bit more than you did before. And then over here with Dak Prescott, I got him over 285.5, so he got bumped up 1 yard, but he was minus 130 over that, and I didn't hate the line. The Detroit defense is not the best against the pass, so it's kind of like a deal of opposites out there, right? One team is really good against the pass, one team is really bad against the pass out there with the Lions, and Dak Prescott is one of the best quarterbacks when it comes to their yardage this year, averaging just over 260 yards per game. And then over there on the Detroit side, you have a defense allowing some of the most yardage in the league, 254 yards per game. So it's a deal of best versus worst. You pretty much have that on both sides of the game here. So that's why I'm targeting these props, right? It's not my favorite slate. I already mentioned that. It's one I would probably keep it, a little bit light on when it comes to the units, but enough solid value here to enter this 2-man. And on PrizePicks, the value is even worse. If you thought the lines on Underdog were inflated, they're all inflated a solid 3-4 yards higher over here on PrizePicks. So just to give you an idea, right, Dak Prescott's at 288. Jared Goff's up at 265 for yardage. Guys like CeeDee Lamb is at 102 yards. I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, at a certain point, you could actually make an argument that you could just slam unders for this game on PrizePicks. Now, I didn't have the stones to do so. That's not something I'm going out there and investing in. But if you had to get any exposure on this side, which I don't, right? I'm just avoiding it altogether. You'd be taking unders, right? All of these lines are higher compared to all the other sports books around the industry. But considering the total, considering the game environment, I don't think it's the best slate to go out there and do so. So on PrizePicks, I'm not going to enter much. The odds for these demons and goblins, if you haven't already seen on Twitter, are horrible. They're among some of the lowest EV props that you can take. And as of the ones that I've checked, there's only been like a handful that have been plus EV compared to books. Now, right, PrizePicks is going to make mistakes from time to time with these demons and goblins, but in general, you're getting much lower return here on this site. As you would for most cards, that is, right? Prop slips. If you go over here to like Hard Rock Bet, DraftKings, FanDuel, almost all the different combinations are going to be better than you get on PrizePicks. But the demons and goblins are even worse, right? The EV on those is even lower than what you'd get for a normal prop slip. So that's it for PrizePicks, right? You're not going to get much from me here. I don't force in exposure. And honestly, out there, just wanted to give you guys that PSA. With the inflated lines over here, if anything, you're probably looking at unders. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Thursday Night Football preview. Go ahead and smash that like button for me on the way out of here, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything in the future. Later on this evening, I'll be dropping a main slate video going over everything you need to know for tomorrow's games, and oh boy, there's a bunch of them out there tomorrow for us. And on top of that, make sure you stay tuned for all the Monday Night Football content as well. I'm hyped up for golf. That'll be back next week. So for all of you golf heads, make sure to keep an eye out for that as well. We got the Tournament of Champions, all the best teeing it up over there in Maui. What's not to love about it? So I'm stoked for that, excited for the game tonight. Best of luck with all of those lineups, any prop slips that you're going with, and let's go out there and have ourselves a profitable night.